In the towns of our fathers, where dignity is measured not by what a man does, but by how loudly he claims to do it, there lived a man who mistook silence for weakness. His name was Ade Kunle, and he was about to learn that the greatest mistake a man can make is to confuse his wife's patience with powerlessness. Because right now, in the gathering dark, 5 royal guards are riding toward his door, and nothing will ever be the same. This is the story of a woman who gathered firewood while her husband gathered pride.
Fair African Tales. Subscribe and turn on the bell for new stories.
Dawn breaks over the rural town of Ayatoro, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. While most homes remain shuttered in sleep, one door opens quietly. A woman emerges carrying a worn basket that has seen 1,000 journeys. Her name is Morahayo, and her day begins while others dream. She wraps her headscarf tighter against the morning chill and walks toward the forest path, her footsteps the only sound in the sleeping town. Behind her, through the window of their modest home, a figure watches from the shadows. Ade Kunle, her husband, watches her leave the same way he watches her every morning, with resentment burning in his chest like swallowed fire. You see, in Ayatoro, a man's worth is his reputation, and a wife's labour can either build that reputation or destroy it. Ade Kunle believes Morahio is destroying his. Every trip she makes to that forest, every bundle of firewood she carries to market, every coin she earns from what he calls beggar's work, it all reflects on him. Or so he tells himself. So he tells anyone who will listen. So he tells her again and again, until the words become as routine as breathing. The forest welcomes Morahio like an old friend. She knows which paths to take, which trees shed the driest branches, where the ground is stable and where it will betray your step. She's been doing this for 3 years now, ever since Ade Kunle's carpentry work dried up like rain in Harmattan season. The town grew poorer. Jobs became scarce. Men gathered in the market square with empty hands and full mouths, talking about the good old days, while their wives found ways to keep food on the table. But while other husbands swallowed their pride and accepted their wives' earnings with quiet gratitude, Ade Kunle chose a different path. He chose mockery. He chose cruelty. He chose to make Morahio pay for his shame every single day. By the time the sun climbs higher, Morahio has gathered enough wood to fill her basket. Her hands are rough with calluses, her back aches from bending and lifting, but her face remains calm, peaceful even. There's something in her eyes that speaks of deeper strength, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself, the kind that simply endures. She begins the walk back to town, the weight of the firewood pressing into her shoulders, and she thinks, as she often does, of a morning very different from this one. A morning 7 years ago when these same trees witnessed a secret that would one day change everything. But that memory is a seed buried deep. For now, it sleeps. Morayo reaches the town as the market comes alive with morning trade. Women spread their wares on woven mats, yams and peppers and dried fish catching the light. Men gather near the palm wine cellar, their laughter too loud for the hour. And there, holding court among them like a king with no kingdom, sits Ade Kunle. He sees his wife approaching with her load of firewood, and something dark passes across his face. Here comes his shame, he thinks. Here comes the evidence of his failure, walking through the market for all to see. Ah, there she is, Ade Kunle calls out, his voice carrying across the market square. Several heads turn. Some people look away quickly. uncomfortable. Others watch with the morbid curiosity reserved for public spectacles. My wife, the firewood woman. Tell me, Morahio, did you greet the trees this morning? Did you apologize to them for lowering yourself to their level? The men around him offer weak chuckles. Pity laughs, really. They've heard these jokes before. They've grown tired of them. But Adekunle feeds on any audience, no matter how reluctant. Morahio sets down her bundle at her usual spot and begins arranging the wood for sale. She doesn't respond. She never responds. Her silence is a skill she's perfected, a shield she's polished through repetition. You know, Adekunle continues, standing now, warming to his performance. When I married you, your father said you came from good breeding. Well raised, he said. Educated by the missionaries, he said. Tell me, which part of that good breeding taught you to grub in the dirt like a bushrat? A few women nearby exchange glances. One of them, Mama Tunde, opens her mouth as if to speak, then closes it again. What can be said? This is between husband and wife. This is the privacy of marriage made public, and who can intervene in such things? But their eyes show what their mouths won't say. Shame. Not for Morahio, but for Adekunle. Shame for the way he tears down the very woman who keeps him fed. Morahio finally speaks, her voice quiet but steady. Survival doesn't ask permission from pride, husband. It's what she always says, her mantra, her truth. And it infuriates him more than any argument ever could, because it carries the weight of undeniable reality. Adekunle's face darkens. Pride? You speak to me of pride? Woman, you've stripped me of any pride I had left. Every day you walk to that forest, you might as well carry a banner that says, Adekunle cannot provide. Every bundle you sell screams, this man is useless. How am I supposed to hold my head up in this town when my own wife does work fit for widows and orphans? An old woman purchasing firewood from Morahio's pile looks up sharply. And yet you eat the food that work provides, she says softly. The market seems to hold its breath. Adekunle stares at the old woman, colour rising in his cheeks. But before he can respond, she's already turned away, tucking the firewood under her arm and walking off with the dignified pace of someone who has lived too long to care about angry men. The moment passes. The market returns to its business, but something has shifted slightly. The other men around Adekunle disperse, suddenly remembering tasks that need attention. He's left standing alone, his moment of entertainment turned sour. He looks at Morahio, still arranging her firewood with patient hands, and the hatred he feels is really hatred for himself, reflected back. But self-awareness is a luxury he cannot afford, so he transforms it into familiar blame. It's her fault, all of it, her fault. What Adekunle doesn't know, what he cannot know because his wife has never spoken of it, is that those trees he mocks her for visiting hold a memory. 7 years ago, before poverty came knocking, before work disappeared like water into sand, before their marriage became this daily battlefield, Morahio went to that forest on a different errand. She'd gone to collect herbs for a sick neighbour. The path was familiar, safe, ordinary, until she found the blood. It was fresh, bright red against the brown earth, leading deeper into the forest like a terrible invitation. Every instinct told her to turn back, to run home, to fetch men with machetes and questions. But another instinct, older and deeper, pulled her forward. She followed the blood trail to a small clearing where a man lay crumpled against a tree trunk, his fine clothes torn and soaked through with red. His eyes were closed. She thought he might be dead. She almost hoped he was dead, because a living man in such condition meant danger, meant questions, meant trouble she couldn't afford. But then his chest moved with a shallow breath, and the decision was made for her. She couldn't leave him. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When life crosses your path, you tend it. You don't calculate the cost first. So Moraheo didn't calculate. She acted. There was an old hunter's hut nearby, abandoned for years but still standing. She dragged the wounded man there with strength she didn't know she possessed, his blood painting her wrapper, her hands, her conscience. For 3 days she went back and forth between town and forest, carrying food, water, herbs. She cleaned his wounds. She kept him hidden. She asked no questions, and he offered no explanations. On the 3rd day, when fever finally broke and his eyes cleared, he looked at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You don't know who I am," he said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head. "Good," he continued. "It's better that way. Safer." He reached into what remained of his clothing and pulled out a small carved wooden token. Intricate and beautiful, marked with symbols she'd never seen. "Take this, keep it safe. One day, when you need it most, this will speak for you. I promise you that." She wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him she needed no payment for doing what any decent person would do, but something in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't payment. This was something else, something important. So she took the token, tucked it away, and helped him to the forest edge when darkness fell. He disappeared into the night, and she never saw him again. She told no one, not her husband, not her family, not her friends. The secret went into a locked room in her heart, and life continued. Until poverty came, and the forest that once held her secret became her salvation in a different way. Now she walks those same paths gathering firewood, passing that old hunter's hut that's collapsed further with each passing season, and sometimes she thinks about that wounded stranger. But mostly she doesn't. Survival keeps you focused on today, not yesterday. The weeks roll forward like wagon wheels in red dust. Moracio's routine never changes. Dawn, forest, market, home. Dawn, forest, market, home. Ade Kunle's routine never changes either. Sleep late, sit in the market, mock his wife, return home empty-handed and full of complaints. The town watches this dance of dignity and disgrace, and opinions form in whispered conversations. Some say Moraio should leave him. Others say a wife's place is patience. Some say Ahde Kunle should be grateful. Others say a man broken by circumstance deserves understanding. But everyone agrees on one thing: something will break eventually. This cannot continue forever. The breaking point comes on a Friday, when the market is most crowded because farmers from outlying villages come to sell their produce. Morahio has had a good morning. Her firewood sold faster than usual, and she's earned enough to buy meat for soup, a rare luxury. She allows herself a small smile as she counts the coins, permits herself a moment of satisfaction in work well done. And Adekunle sees that smile. Something in him snaps. He crosses the market in quick strides, his face twisted with rage that's been building for months, for years. "You smile," he says, loud enough that conversations stop, loud enough that heads turn. "You actually smile. You're proud of yourself, aren't you? Proud of this shameful work, proud of humiliating me in front of the entire town." Morahio's smile fades. Husband, please, not today. Not today? His laugh is bitter, caustic. When then? When would be a good day for you to remember who you are? You were raised better than this, Mirio. Your father was a clerk. Your mother kept a proper home. You went to missionary school. You could read and write before you were 10 years old. And look at you now, lower than the beggars who sit at the palace gates. At least they have the honesty to admit they're begging. You pretend this is dignity. The market has gone completely silent now. Even the usual sounds of commerce, the haggling and banter and laughter, have stopped. Everyone watches, everyone hears. And Morahayo feels something she hasn't felt in years. Not anger, that would be too simple, but a deep, profound exhaustion with carrying both her own burden and her husband's ego. I keep us alive, she says quietly. That is not shameful. You keep us alive. Adekunle's voice rises to a shout. You keep my shame alive. Every day, every trip to that cursed forest, every bundle you sell, you tell the world that I am nothing, that Adekunle cannot provide for his own wife, that I'm less than a man. You should refuse to do this work. You should sit at home and wait for me to find something proper, something that doesn't make us the laughingstock of Ayetoro. And what would we eat while we wait? Morahio's voice remains steady, but tears have begun to slip down her cheeks. Tell me, husband, what would we eat? Your pride? Would your pride fill our bellies? The crowd seems to lean in, holding its collective breath. This is new. Morahio never argues back. Never. Her patient silence has been her signature, her shield. But something has shifted. Adekunle feels it too, feels the ground moving under his feet, and it terrifies him. So he does what frightened men often do. He lashes out harder. You want to know the truth? His voice drops to something cold and cruel. I'm ashamed to call you my wife. When men ask about my home, I change the subject. When they ask what my wife does, I lie. Because the truth, the shameful, disgraceful truth, is that my wife scratches in the dirt like an animal, gathering sticks like a madwoman, selling them like a beggar. My friends pity me. My enemies laugh at me. And you just keep doing it. Keep choosing this humiliation over your husband's honor. Morahayo stands there, tears streaming now, her hands still holding the coins from her morning's work. The coins that will buy tonight's food. The coins that represent hours of labor and aching muscles and the quiet dignity of survival. She looks at her husband, really looks at him, and something in her eyes changes. Not hatred, something sadder. Disappointment, perhaps, or maybe just acceptance of who he truly is. She gathers her empty basket without a word. She walks through the silent market, past neighbors who suddenly find their goods very interesting, past women whose eyes follow her with a mixture of pity and respect. She walks home alone while her husband remains in the market square, surrounded by uncomfortable witnesses to his cruelty, suddenly aware that he may have gone too far but unable to admit it, even to himself. That evening, their home is silent in a new way, not the silence of routine, but the silence of something broken that cannot be easily repaired. Morahio sits by the window as darkness falls, and her hand finds its way to an old wooden box where she keeps the few precious things she owns. Her mother's wrapper, her grandmother's beads, and buried beneath them, nearly forgotten, a carved wooden token given to her 7 years ago by a dying man who made a promise. She holds it up to the lamplight, studying the strange symbols, wondering not for the first time who he was and why he never returned for it. Outside, in the gathering dark, 5 horses bearing royal guards begin their journey from the capital city toward a small forgotten town called Ayatoro. They ride with purpose, following information that took years to gather. They carry a king's gratitude and a king's question. Where is the woman who saved my life? But Morayo doesn't know this. Adekunle doesn't know this. The town doesn't know this. They all sleep, or try to sleep, in the last night of their old lives, unaware that tomorrow everything will change. That 5 visitors in gold and crimson will arrive with questions that will shatter Adekunle's world and reveal truths he never imagined. Because here's what he doesn't understand, what he's never understood about the woman he mocks. Morahio's strength isn't despite her humble work, it's because of it. Her dignity isn't in avoiding hardship, it's in facing it without complaint. And the kindness that sent her into danger to save a stranger's life 7 years ago, that same kindness has kept his stomach full while he tore her down. That same mercy that asked for nothing in return from a dying man will soon be offered to him. And he will have to decide whether he can accept grace from someone he's spent years trying to break. The question is not whether Morahio deserves better. Everyone knows she does. The question is whether Adekunle can become better. Whether a man who measures worth by public opinion can learn to see value in private virtue. Whether someone who has built his identity on false pride can survive the revelation that true dignity was beside him all along, carrying firewood, earning coins, keeping them alive while he kept his delusions. Tomorrow, 5 royal guards will arrive. Tomorrow, the truth will come knocking. Tomorrow, Adekunle will discover that the greatest treasure in his life was the thing he treasured least. But tonight, he still doesn't know. Tonight, he still believes he's the victim. Tonight, he still thinks his wife's labor is his shame rather than his salvation. So tell me, when pride meets truth at your door wearing royal colors, which one do you think survives? The hoofbeats arrive like thunder on a dry afternoon. 5 horses, gold bridles catching sunlight, riders in crimson and gold, the colors of royalty, the colors of power, the colors that make common people scatter like chickens before a hawk. They ride through Ayatoro's dusty streets with purpose, and behind them, the entire town empties into the roads. Children run alongside the horses. Women abandon their cooking pots. Men leave their palm wine half drunk. Because when royal guards come to a town like this, someone's life is about to change forever. The only question is, will it be for better or for worse? Adekunle hears the commotion before he sees it. He's at the market square, pretending to discuss carpentry work with men who stopped listening to him weeks ago, when the sound of hooves and shouting voices turns every head. His stomach drops. Royal guards mean taxes or arrests or conscription. His mind races through possibilities. That gambling debt from 2 years ago, has someone finally reported it? That boundary dispute with his neighbour, has it reached official ears? Or worse, much worse, has someone accused him of something he actually did? The procession moves through the town like a ceremonial snake, winding between compounds until it stops. And when Adekunle sees where it stops, his blood turns to ice water. His home. The guards have stopped at his home. He pushes through the gathering crowd, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Morahio is already at the door, drawn by the noise, her face a mask of confusion and rising fear. She steps forward, placing herself between the guards and the threshold, still protecting what's hers, still shielding even the husband who tears her down. The head guard dismounts with practiced grace. He's older, seasoned, his face weathered by sun and duty. His eyes scan the crowd, then settle on Morayo with an expression that makes no sense. Recognition, respect, something that looks almost like relief. He walks toward her, and the crowd presses closer, hungry for the revelation, for the scandal, for whatever truth is about to spill into the open air. And then, impossible as sunrise at midnight, the guard drops to one knee. His 4 companions follow. 5 royal guards, representatives of the king himself, kneeling in the dust before a firewood cellar. The crowd gasps. Someone drops a clay pot, and it shatters in the silence. Ardekunle stands frozen, his mouth open, his mind unable to process what his eyes are showing him. "We have searched for you for 7 years," the guard says, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "The king has sent us to bring you home." Home? What home? Morayo's lips move, but no sound comes out. The guard reaches into his saddlebag and pulls out a piece of parchment, unfolds it carefully, reveals a drawing. Even from a distance, even through her shock, Morayo recognizes what it shows. The wooden token, the carved symbols. The promise made 7 years ago in a hunter's hut stained with blood and secrets. "You saved his life," the guard continues, and now his voice softens with something like awe. "Before he became king, when assassins hunted him through these forests, you asked for nothing. You revealed nothing. You wanted nothing. He has never forgotten. He made a vow that if he lived to take the throne, he would find the woman who showed him mercy when mercy could have cost her everything." The crowd erupts. Questions fly like startled birds. What did she do? When did this happen? Why didn't anyone know? Ardekunle's world tilts on its axis. His wife who he mocks for gathering firewood in those very forests, once saved the king's life. The king! The woman he called lower than a beggar has been sought by royalty for 7 years. The mathematics of it refuse to add up in his spinning mind. But Morayo, she remembers now, the wounded stranger, the blood trail, the 3 days of secret nursing. The token pressed into her hand with a promise she'd dismissed as fever talk. It was real. All of it was real. And he remembered. For 7 years, through the chaos of taking a throne, through wars and politics and the endless demands of kingship, he remembered the woman who saved him and asked for nothing in return. "You have a choice," the head guard says, rising to his feet. "The king requests your presence, but he commanded us to say this. You are summoned, not compelled. If you wish to remain here in peace, we will leave and never return. But if you come, the king wishes to repay a debt he says can never truly be repaid." He pauses, glances at Ardekunle with eyes that see too much, then back to Morayo. "The choice is yours alone to make. What would you do if your past walked up to your door dressed in royal colours, offering to transform your present? Would you go? Would you leave behind everything you know, even if everything you know has been hard and thankless and small? Would you trust a promise made 7 years ago by a dying man who turned out to be a king?" Morayo looks at her home. She looks at the forest in the distance where she spent 3 years gathering firewood, where she once saved a life. She looks at her husband, frozen in confusion and fear, and something in her expression shifts. Not cruelty, not revenge, just a quiet decision made by someone who has survived too much to be afraid of change. "I'll go," she says. The journey to the capital takes 3 days, and they are the longest 3 days of Ardekunle's life. He wasn't invited exactly, but he wasn't excluded either, so he follows, because what else can he do? Stay behind and face a town that just watched his wife receive honours he never earned. The guards provide horses, provisions, everything needed. They treat Morechio with careful respect, answering her questions, ensuring her comfort. They treat Ardechunle with polite indifference, like furniture that happens to be travelling with the important guest. On the first night, camped beneath stars that seem brighter away from town, Ardechunle tries to reclaim some ground. He tells the guards about his carpentry skills, hints that surely the palace needs craftsmen, positions himself as Morahio's natural partner in whatever comes next. They nod politely and change the subject. He tries to learn details about what the king plans for his wife, but they know nothing beyond their orders. Find her, bring her safely, treat her with honour. Morayo rides in silence mostly, processing memories and possibilities. Once, Ardechunle catches her looking at him with an expression he can't read. Not anger, not even disappointment anymore. Something more unsettling. Pity, perhaps, or the look you give something you've already said goodbye to in your heart. The capital city rises from the horizon on the third day like a mirage made solid. Ayatoro could fit inside one district of this sprawling metropolis. Buildings of stone and wood tower 3-4 stories high. Markets that stretch for acres. Streets paved with stones instead of dirt. And at the centre, dominating everything, the palace. Its walls seem to touch the clouds, painted white and gold, decorated with carvings that catch the light and throw it back transformed. Ardechunle shrinks with each passing street. Here, his village confidence means nothing. Here, nobody knows his name or cares about his opinions. Here, he's just another poor visitor from nowhere, attached to someone actually important. The reversal is complete and devastating. Morahio, though, sits straighter as they ride deeper into the city. She watches everything with keen eyes, asking questions about trade, about governance, about how such a large place feeds itself. Her mind is working, always working. And Ardechunle realizes, perhaps for the first time, that his wife is intelligent in ways he never bothered to notice. They're brought to the palace, ushered through courtyards that could hold his entire village. Servants bow to Morahio, servants bowing to his wife. The woman he called shameful yesterday, the woman whose work he mocked this morning. She's shown to quarters that make their home look like a chicken coop, all carved wood and soft fabrics and windows that overlook gardens Ardechunle couldn't have imagined existed. He's given a smaller room nearby, clearly an afterthought. The message is subtle but clear. She matters here. You're just along for the journey. That evening, they're summoned to the throne room. The chamber is vast, lit by 100 lamps, filled with nobles and officials and people who wear power like expensive cloth. And at the centre, elevated on a throne of carved mahogany inlaid with gold, sits the king. He's older than Morahio remembers, his face marked by the weight of ruling, but his eyes hold the same intensity she saw in that forest hut. When Morahio enters, he does something that makes the entire court gasp. He stands. A king doesn't stand for anyone except another monarch, but he stands for her. 7 years I've searched, he says, his voice carrying across the silent room. 7 years I've sent men to every village, every town, asking about a woman who saved a stranger and asked for nothing. A woman who risked everything for someone she didn't know. A woman whose kindness I carried through battles and politics and betrayal, because it reminded me that goodness exists even in darkness. He descends from his throne, walks across the polished floor, stops before Morehio. "I owe you my life. How does one repay such a debt?" The king offers gold. Enough gold to buy half of Ayatoro. He offers land, a compound in the capital with servants and security. He offers titles, a position at court for her and her family. Adekunle's eyes widen with each offer, his mind already spending wealth, planning his new life of importance and luxury. Finally, the respect he deserves. His wife's luck will become his salvation. But Morahio asks for time to consider. "Time?" Adekunle nearly shouts. "What is there to consider? They're being handed everything on a golden platter and she wants to think about it." The king, amused and impressed, grants her request. That night, while Adekunle paces their quarters imagining their glorious future, Morahio walks the palace gardens alone. She sees it clearly now, the servants labouring in lamplight while nobles feast, the washerwomen at the river before dawn, the market women hauling goods, women everywhere working in shadows, doing the labour that keeps the visible world functioning. Women just like her. Women whose work is dismissed even as it holds everything together. She sees herself in them, and she sees possibility. When she returns to the king the next day, she makes a request that stuns the court. Not gold for herself, not position or property. She asks for authority over the royal forests and the right to organize the women who work them. She proposes regulations, fair wages, collection centres, training. She wants to transform firewood gathering from shame work into enterprise, from humiliation into dignity. The king, who earned his throne partly through understanding that small changes ripple outward, sees genius in her request. He grants it immediately, gives her resources, assigns her staff. Within weeks, Morahio has an office, a budget, a mission. And Adekunle, he watches from the margins as his wife builds something remarkable. Women flood to her office seeking work, seeking hope, seeking the dignity she promises. Morahio moves through it all with calm authority, making decisions, solving problems, treating the work he once mocked as sacred and transformative. She's magnificent. She always was. He just refused to see it. But here's the moment that changes everything. One evening, Morahio requests a private audience with the king. Adekunle expects her to ask for something for herself, finally. Instead, she asks for something that stops his heart. "Give my husband work in my office," she says, "not to punish him, not to humiliate him, but to teach him. Let him see what he couldn't see before. Let him learn what I had to learn, that there's no shame in honest labour, only in honest labour despised." The king studies her with those eyes that miss nothing. That's mercy beyond what most would offer. "It's not mercy," Morahio says quietly. "It's hope. Hope that people can change if given the chance." So Adekunle is offered a clerk position in his wife's office, under her authority. His pride screams refusal. His pride wants to storm out, return to Ayatoro, rebuild his reputation away from this humiliation. But his pride has nowhere left to go. He's broke in a strange city. He has no skills that matter here. He's attached himself to his wife's rising star, and now that star is offering him a choice: learn or be left behind completely. He accepts. What else can he do? And so begins the strangest chapter of Adekunle's life. Each morning, he reports to an office where his wife is already working, where people bow to her and barely notice him. He sits at a small desk processing applications from women seeking permits to work in the royal forests. He stamps documents. He files reports. He does the administrative labor he once considered beneath him while his wife transforms an entire industry. And slowly, painfully, like a bone-setting wrong that must be broken again to heal properly, Ada Kunle begins to see. He sees the widow who needs work to feed 4 children. He sees the young woman escaping a violent marriage through economic independence. He sees the grandmother supporting orphaned grandchildren. He sees their faces when Morahio approves their applications, when she hands them tools and assignments, and the dignity of purpose. He sees what his wife has been doing all along, keeping people alive, keeping hope alive. And it wasn't shameful, it was sacred. He just couldn't see it because he was measuring worth with the wrong tools. But can seeing be enough? Can understanding change a man who spent years perfecting cruelty? Or is Ade Kunle's transformation too little, too late? Will Morahio forgive him? Should she? And what happens when a man realizes that everything he mocked was actually everything he needed to learn? So tell me, if you were Morahio, would you offer mercy to someone who spent years tearing you down? When the world finally sees your worth, when power is finally in your hands, is it weakness to extend grace, or is it the ultimate strength? And for those who have been Ade Kunle, blind to the treasure beside them, measuring worth by all the wrong standards, is transformation even possible? Can a man who built his identity on pride learn to find dignity in humility? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story stirred something in you, hit that subscribe button. Because every week, we bring you tales that don't just entertain, they transform.